The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to Estuit's webinar titled Protect Sensitive Information from Rogue Insiders While Reducing Compliance Cost. Today's presenters are Bill Salarday, IBM's General Business Sales Leader for Optum through North America, and Mark Hebert, Chief Operating Officer, Estuit Inc. Mr. Salarday has over 20 years of sales, channels, and business development experience in the software industry. He joined IBM in 1996 and has held several sales, marketing, and business development positions. For the past 4 years, Mr. Salarday has had various responsibilities within the Optum and Guardium segments of IBM's information management brand. Most notably, he helped to develop a high-value business partner network for Optum and Guardium. Mark Hebert joined Estuit in December 2008 as its Chief Operating Officer. From 2006 through 2008, he was the Chief Marketing Officer for Virtusa Corporation, a publicly traded IT services firm. From 1999 through 2006, he was Executive Vice President, Marketing and Alliances for Sierra Atlantic, where he was responsible for corporate positioning, lead generation, public relations, and partner development. Prior to his appointment in 1999, he served on Sierra Atlantic's Board of Directors for 3 years. If you'd like a copy of the presentation, please send an email directly to Bill or Mark. Their contact information will be given at the end. Thank you, Bill and Mark, for presenting, and I'll turn the webinar over to you now.
Great. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. This is going to be the first in a series of webinars that we're going to be promoting with our business partner, Estuit. So this is Bill Salarday. We're going to run through about 30 minutes of content talking about specifically the insiders or the hidden risks to corporate data. There seems to be a lot of noise around external breaches, but you'll see through the presentation that numerous data breaches occur from rogue insiders. So let's get started. If you've got any questions, I believe you can, there's a panel over on to the right. You can be asking questions throughout and chat with us. So appreciate it, and we'll open it up for questions at the end. So what we're going to talk about today a little bit is the threat from insiders, really understanding a little bit more about what's happening, the different types of data breaches that occur from insiders, really the challenges of protecting sensitive data, and how do you manage that throughout the organization. And then we're going to really dive into really kind of, the 4 essentials of security and privacy around data security. And then last but not least, we're going to talk, I'll turn it over to Mark Hebert of Estuit to talk a little bit about their successes in the industry and some of the successes that they've had in talking with customers, particularly in these areas. So let's get started. One of the things that Verizon does a business study. They do a study every year, and they do it in conjunction. Over the past few years, they've been doing it in conjunction with the United States Secret Service. And that study talks about different data breaches and how they investigate and where those data breaches occur. One of the telling statistics from that was they said about 17% of data breaches were attributed to internal agents, and that basically means insiders inside the organization, trusted people, if you will. The interesting point of that, though, is that while the number, 17%, might seem low, it's really interesting that year to year, the incidents have doubled. And so that just goes to show you that, data breaches are occurring at a very rapid pace. It's exploding both internally and externally. And Verizon and the Secret Service have kind of outlined a few different things around, how these breaches occurred, where they occurred, who was responsible for them, et cetera. And so some of the key things, the statistics from that particular report talked about the 3 different types of insiders, those that act deliberately and maliciously, those that are acting inappropriately but not maliciously, and then just those that were just unintentional and without malice. The interesting thing to note here is over 93% of the internal breaches were deliberate and malicious events. Those people that went out and deliberately stole identities, stole information from the databases, from the customer data, and then were doing malicious different types of activities with that. The other interesting thing is, these are the reported incidents, right, that we're hearing about. But most likely we're not hearing about all of them because it's regular employees that are doing this, small end users, and they're really smaller incidents. But these small incidents can really turn into big PR nightmares for companies. And we'll go through a couple of the examples later. And then we're also, the other thing that they kind of identified in the report was that the more privileged and trusted employees really lead to larger breaches, because these employees have access to more data, full sets of data, et cetera, where they're taking that full sets of data as opposed to one and two, and then going out and doing again malicious activities with that data. Right. So let's look at some of the examples of these are actual reported data breaches, and you'll see there's a couple on here most recently. In one incident, there was an insider that was arrested on charges of selling Holocaust survivor identity information. We won't go through the details of that, but essentially they were taking information and they were selling it. The informant was telling the person that stole the data he wanted it for tax fraud purposes. So it's really interesting, and they sold the data in away they go. So that's one instance. Another one was a very unique instance, was that a company was outsourcing some of its development to a third party offshore. It turned out that outsourcer is now defunct. However, a lot of the patient information showed up on a website. Again, so that's an instance of live actual data that was sent outside the organization to a trusted partner, but yet was exposed. The next instance talks about an unprotected set of test data, similar situation, where it was sent to a development and test teams, and then that organization was robbed of several computers. And when they robbed those computers, there was sensitive information from those clients that were entrusting that third-party agent to manage that environment. And then the last one is really topical now, given the recent events in the Blagojevich trial. President Obama was subpoenaed and testified, and the documents had all been redacted. Unfortunately, it was improper redaction that took place, and it really kind of exposed some of the comments that were made by President Obama during that trial. So those are, the issue is real. It's out there. There's thousands of data breaches that occur every single year, and you just don't want your name showing up on the front pages of the news. So if we look at the next chart, this one was a survey done by Forrester. And Forrester asked, which of the following initiatives are likely to be your firm's top IT security priorities over the next 12 months? Given the amount of data breaches that are out there and the complexity of data breaches and and then the risk and compliance associated with data breaches, it's no surprise that data security, is really kind of year in, year out been the top priority for different organizations. So we continue to see that, and it's out there, and it's something that organizations are trying to wrestle with as we speak. So what do organizations do, right? So the first thing that they need to look at is where do we go from here? We know it's real. We know it's an imminent threat. We know that it's a cost-effective or a costly issue, but what do we do about it? Some organizations are just stymied by it and say, we just can't do anything, right? We've got too much on our plates, too much going on. But, if you really stop and think about it, studies indicate that, the cost of an average data breach is $7.2 million. The average cost of a record data breach is over $200. And so what we're finding is the risk of doing nothing, is just far too great anymore. You've got to take action. So those that are taking action, you've got two different approaches. You can take the homegrown approach of let's develop it manually in-house. But what we're finding in that is that the changes, the regulations are changing so quickly, and the granularity of control needs to be down at such a level, down by the user activity, that it just becomes cost prohibitive sometimes for organizations to try to keep up with the changes. And then, as we say here, there's new sources of threats happening all the time, right? Whether it be outsourcing or web-facing or just stolen credentials of, or just again rogue insiders. So there's too many different threats happening in too many different ways, along with the complex regulations that are out there. So So a lot of organizations now are turning over to organizations like IBM and Estuate to try to figure out, how do we implement a holistic data protection strategy, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. So as we move on, really the four essentials that we're looking at around data security and privacy. Starting on the left, the first real topic that we have to worry about is discover the location of sensitive data, right? There's the old saying, if you don't know where it is, how can you manage it, right? So we've got an offering that InfoSphere Discovery that we'll talk about a little bit more in the following slides. The next column over is masking data in non-production environments. And again, given a couple of the examples given before, you can see that just taking production data and exposing it to external sources, that's an obvious problem and an obvious risk. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Optum data masking solution for masking those non-production environments. The next column over, monitor database activity and assess vulnerabilities. This talks about managing the insiders as they go about their daily routines, right? So trusted people with access to the environments and the critical sensitive data. Just being able to access, monitor, and basically prevent out of the ordinary activities from occurring. If we know that the teller is only supposed to be working from 8 to 5, but all of a sudden, midnight the teller starts logging in remotely and starts doing some things, probably that's out of the norm. And so being able to recognize that as a potential threat and shut that activity down is what we're talking about when we talk about the Guardium database activity monitoring and vulnerability assessment. And then last but not least is the redact unstructured data in documents. Again, going back to the example of President Obama, being able to redact with accuracy, with stringent controls over what's being redacted and controlling what information is then released is something that we'll talk about with our Guardium data redaction set. All right? So let's move on to the next part, and we'll start driving down a little bit deeper into each of those solution areas. The first solution that we're going to talk about is our InfoSphere Discovery. InfoSphere Discovery, as we said, there's no such thing as a standalone system anymore. Systems, there's systems and there's systems of systems. They're all interconnected, interrelated. What we're finding is that critical sensitive data can be stored throughout these different data sets, and without knowing where that data is and how it's related, you don't know where your sensitive data really resides, right? It's the old adage, you don't know what you don't know. And so being able to go into those different data sets, be able to pull out sample sets of data and to identify where the sensitive data is, whether it's Social Security information, whether it's credit card information, it could be stored across multiple different databases. And being able to pull that hidden data out is going to be critical to being able to protect it. So that's the first step in really any one of these projects that you're going to look at from a data security perspective is understand and know what's sensitive in your environment. And being able to automate that process is going to help you out dramatically. All right. So let's take a look at one of the successes around InfoSphere Optum Discovery. This is a leading automobile manufacturer. They had the challenge that they were having was all around understanding where their sensitive data was located so that they can eliminate the risk of exposing data. There was, with all the different recalls that were happening in the automobile industry at the time, this particular client really needed to take an extra effort to secure their sensitive data to make sure that it wasn't exposed. And at the same time, they were implementing a non-production data security strategy as well. So really the value that they pulled from being able to implement the discovery tool, it dramatically reduced the time versus manually going through and identifying the different sensitive data elements throughout the organization. They were able to, secure the employee and client information with authority. They knew exactly where the data was, and they could share with regulators and whatnot that the data had been accurately desensitized and secured. And then the real value that the development team got out of this was really quality and time to value in application development. So as they were rolling out new applications, they needed to be able to swiftly and accurately mask that data so that the developers would not have access to it. And so by implementing Discovery ahead of that project, it helped them quickly be able to use iterations and develop iterations of the application. That's one example that we've got on that one. Let's move on to the next one, the Optum data masking solution. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the organization was looking at masking non-production data as well. So being able to de-identify that sensitive information is one thing, but being able to then take it, put it into a development and test environment to be able to get predictable, accurate and predictable results off of your application development efforts is really the critical piece there. So with the Optum data masking solution, we can take that live data that we have on that credit card information and transform it and move it into another set of data, which basically makes the valid still syntactically intact and still usable and completely referenceable when it comes to application development. So that's one of the key things that we can do with the data masking solution. And again, some of the key benefits there are going to be, basically time to value around getting your data up, getting your applications out on time, and getting more efficiency out of your application development teams. And at the same time, securing regulations, whether it be PCI, payment card, or HIPAA, or things like that, protecting data throughout the organization. All right. So that's our data masking solution that we'll talk about. Here's an example of a leading household goods company. They had some issues around their SAP human capital management system, and they needed to make sure that all of their employee data was in their testing environments was secured. They didn't want to have access. They didn't want their developers to have access to name and address and payroll information, social security numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And so when they, after the deployment, they looked at it and they came back to us and they said, the biggest thing that we saw in that was the reduced time to, to basically versus manual, right? We knew we had to do it. It was a requirement to do it. The option we had was either manually go in and code this and do different scramble routines or implement, a kind of an out-of-the-box solution, so to speak, with templates to be able to automatically mask in various different ways. So that was the thing they came back with, was time to value, again, saying, it was a requirement. They came back. We were able to do it quickly and efficiently. So let's move on to the next chart. We'll talk about our next solution, which is our Guardium database activity monitoring and vulnerability assessment. So with Guardium, we talked about before, being able to online kind of real-time and continuously monitor the different activity of what's happening at the database level. What user is touching which information at what time. And having the ability to have policies and business rules wrapped around who can access what data, again, being very critical. There's numerous instances that are always published about people going in and accessing account records that they shouldn't be accessing. Being able to go into a hospital and somebody pulling up, whether it be a high-profile person and looking at their medical history. If that's out of the norm, we want to be able to audit that, report on that, and be able to have evidence that that activity is out of the norm. The other thing is, give you the ability to shut down that activity. While we're really talking about insiders here, one of the key things that Guardium can help with is the external threat of stolen credentials. So, SQL injection is one of the biggest issues that organizations have with data breaches today. The outsiders are going in, they're penetrating those web app firewalls, they're getting into the database with SQL injection attacks, being able to emulate a trusted user, and by doing that, they're pulling down massive amounts of data. Guardium can detect that activity is out of the norm and then shut that activity down automatically. So again, protecting that data from leaving the premises. So again, that's one of the key things around database activity monitoring. The vulnerability assessment in conjunction with Guardium goes through and actually takes a look at your systems and tries to understand, hey, you've got out-of-the-box default passwords set up on these different servers. Obviously those are definitely areas of risk and fraud. You're not up on the latest security patches, et cetera. So the vulnerability assessment helps you identify different servers within your environment that you should be looking at to be taking action. So again, two critical areas there. So in this instance, the success story here was a client had deployed the Guardium database activity monitoring. You'll see the alphabet soup, right? One of the challenges they had was with SOX and PCI and SAS 70. There were all types of compliance issues that they had to maintain. And when they looked at that, the current as-is business model was to go in and manually, right, through in-house scripts, basically try to understand, pulling down database logs, correlating information across logs to try to identify who was touching what data when and where and how. So by implementing Guardium, they were able to quickly deploy over Guardium onto 300 database servers and 10 different data centers. And they did it, obviously, in a very quick and efficient manner, right? They did it in 12 weeks, and they got it deployed, to 725 database servers in phase 2. Now, being able to, eliminate the need for scripting, being able to go into those environments and automatically layer down that protection was critical for them. And again, it helped them maintain compliance and automate that compliance and lower the cost of maintenance of maintaining it. All right, last but not least, we're going to move over to the Guardium redaction. On Guardium redaction, we're talking about protecting sensitive data in unstructured documents, right, and in forms. And so in this particular instance, we're taking a form that's on the left with all of that sensitive data. We need to be able to maybe to present that information, out to the web, maybe out to your constituents. Maybe you need to present it throughout the organization at some point. But there may not be a need to, be sending out a person's account number or that person's name and address and maybe their social security number. So we can pull that information out. You can redact that information from the document, but still store that document in the environment and get it around to the people who need to see it. One of the examples that we always talk about is, in the world of medical, a doctor doesn't necessarily need to know what a patient's social security number is, but they do need to understand what the diagnosis is and some of the medical history. So in certain applications, why even present that doctor with that social security number information? It doesn't make sense. So being able to redact that information and then present it back to the doctor, you can see that information, that's pertinent to the employee at that time. And obviously, the key benefits here prevents really unintentional data disclosure. And again, going back to the Obama thing, there were statements that were made that didn't need to be made public, and then they were made public, and that therein causes all kinds of issues. So let's move on to the success story that we have. In this particular instance, it was an insurance organization that had issues with the payment card industry, PCI, DSS, Guardium data redaction. Again, throughout the organization, put it onto different documents. We redacted different documents that had health information as well as financial information. And really what we did is eliminate the manual process, right? It was what they were doing was a manual redaction process, pulling up the documents using, a single tool to actually redact that information. With the Guardium redaction, it's a high-speed, high-accuracy solution that can ingest all that data and automatically redact it. We've got, the numbers that we had in this particular instance. We had 97% accuracy, machine automation. Those exceptions were then kicked out and handled by the manual process as opposed to basically 100% manual. So again, the key thing here where the customer basically came back and, the customer told us we're thoroughly impressed with the redactions, capabilities, and accuracy. So anyway, that kind of wraps up the 4 topics that we were talking about today. And again, just to recap before I pass it over to Mark, right, the things that we're talking about are data discovery, right, understanding where the sensitive data is in your organization, and again, leveraging our discovery tool for that can help you. Masking data in those non-production environments, right, whether it's dev or test or QA or offshore development, we're going to be talking about Optum data masking to help you eliminate that risk of exposure of data in non-production environments. For production environments, we're talking about the Guardium database activity to continuously in real time monitor those different databases and who's touching what, and doing it at a at a policy-based or role-based kind of method. And then the last but not least is the unstructured documents and files and forms in the organization. We're going to monitor or redact those using the Guardium data redaction tool, and again to eliminate any risk or breaches from non-structured content. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark. As Mike had introduced him earlier, Mark is the Chief Operating Officer of Estuate, one of our premier partners for IBM and implementation services and consulting services for Optum and Guardium. So Mark, over to you.
Thanks very much, Bill. We are at ground level on a lot of these issues in the security area, particularly with respect to insiders and the vulnerability of companies with their key employees. And so I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking about our perspective in working with a lot of different customers. So just as a general sense of who we are, a thumbnail about us. We've been around for 7 years. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley, and our founders and myself spent 40-plus years at Oracle, really focused in the enterprise applications part of that business. We interacted with a lot of customers who are Oracle applications customers, and we continue to do that a lot in our business today. About 3 years ago, we began a practice around IBM products that interoperate with Oracle products, and so a lot of what we do, about 40% of our business, has to do with the products that we're talking about this morning, and with a strong security focus. Go to the next slide, Bill, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the customers that we've been working with that have had experience in these areas. I think it's really true that security is on an upward trend with our key enterprise customers. The concern around insider information and insider employees misusing information is very real. We've done about 80 projects with IBM, Optum, and Guardium products for the last 3 years. We have a very close working relationship with IBM. In fact, we helped build some of those products, and we specialize in the implementation of these products as well. Let me just spend a couple of minutes with a few examples of customers who've had good success in implementing products like this. In the Guardium area, what we're finding is customers have a lot of interest in monitoring their production databases, particularly their ERP systems, to make sure that their DBAs and people who really have critical access anytime are properly monitored. And a product like Guardium is a very quick way to get control of that situation and assure the compliance and security officers of the company that they're meeting Sarbanes-Oxley and other kinds of compliance requirements. We've done projects with Guardium at companies including Bechtel, Silver Spring Networks, and Molson Coors, all with that goal in mind. On the Optum side, in the whole area of data privacy and the sensitivity of private data in non-production systems, I'd say of those 80 projects we've completed, a third of them involve the sensitivity of data and the implementation of Optum data privacy. A couple of really interesting examples includes Pfizer and a fairly complex test environment where they were dealing with sensitive employee data in multiple systems in a sort of a system integration testing environment that required the masking of data not only in their Oracle system but also in their PeopleSoft. And so a lot of the concerns we had there was to make sure that when we masked that data, it was done consistently across major applications that integrate with each other. Another good example is the large defense industry client you see on the right. This was a European defense ministry with literally tens of thousands of employees, very sophisticated masking algorithms that was very specific to that country's security rules, and we used the data privacy product to develop fairly complex algorithms for monitoring that kind of masking that kind of data. So that's a few examples of customers that we have done work with. We are open for business throughout North America, and we'll be following up with you all who joined the call this morning. We'll send you a copy of this presentation, and we'll also send you a copy of the Verizon report that Bill described at the beginning of the session. And with that, I'm going to close it down and turn it over back to Mike for questions.
Great. Thanks, guys, for presenting. To the attendees, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them via the questions function in GoToWebinar, and we'll get them answered. Guys, we have our first question here. How long does it take to implement data masking?
So it's very interesting. These products, including the data privacy product, are really designed to provide quick hits and very fast time to benefit. Most of the projects that I described, the third or so of those 80 that are data masking projects, were 2 months in length or less. It's very easy to pick a small project with these and sort of peel the onion back, develop the data masking for one specific database. That can be developed very quickly using discovery to make sure you've got the right data elements. That perhaps takes a week or two. And then the implementation of algorithms for masking can be done also in another week or two, and so you can actually get a project done as quickly as a month.
Okay, great.
And the
Thank you.
benefits accrue as a result.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Here's our next question. How long does it take to implement Guardium for database activity monitoring? Well,
in the same way, you can implement Guardium with a very small footprint as a good way to get started. The case study that Bill described was a 12-week project for something like 300 databases, but I'd say that most customers have a small number of mission-critical databases like their production ERP systems that really require the most scrutiny. And so most of our Guardium projects actually last a week or two. You can get in, install the software or the hardware appliance, whichever approach you pick, make the connectivity to the database, use out-of-the-box functionality, say targeting Oracle E-Business Suite or other packages, and be up and running in a matter of a few days. Once you get comfortable with the product, then you can simply add additional databases and create much more sophisticated dashboards, but you get the benefit of the insider security immediately.
Great, thank you. Our next question. Do you get involved in negotiating pricing for these products between IBM and your client?
So as an IBM partner, we are a reseller of all these products, and yes, we do get involved in negotiating price, and many times we can offer a more attractive price than IBM directly, given the partner relationship that we have.
Okay, thank you. Here's our next question. Can you and IBM outline how your organizations manage to stay on top of regulatory developments so that customers can bring in long-term partnering instead of having to do it themselves?
I would say that is a specialty area that does require real competence. There are companies that specialize in local regulations and international ones. We are not yet expert in that area. We don't provide those general consulting services, but we'd be happy to refer you to others who do.
Okay, great. Thank you. It looks like we have no more questions, guys. I want to thank you guys for presenting this morning. We have a recording, or we recorded this webinar as well. And can you put up a contact slide so the attendees can email or call you if they have any further questions? Great, thank you. Thank you guys for presenting today, and thank you to the attendees for attending. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.